You're watching the Debka Files, a weekly roundup of exclusive news, insight and analysis from the Middle East, broadcast to you from the heart of the region. Coming up on the programme today. The US reportedly deploys troops in the Kirkuk region of Iraq, 100 kilometers away from the Iranian border. That's the closest stationing on the ground in Iraq since the 2003 invasion. Israeli warplanes attack a military position near Damascus. Debka File sources saying the missiles targeted a secret meeting of Iran-allied officers. And the Palestinian Authority tries to rally last-minute diplomatic support to stop US President Donald Trump from recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital. In our top story this week, a large US military presence has been stationed at the K1 camp southwest of Kirkuk in Iraq. This, according to Debka File sources. It's one of the key military bases in the oil-rich region taken over by Iraqi forces and allied militia last October. The reported deployment comes after a new report by the US Defense Department shows the number of troops in Iraq are far higher than previously admitted. Official numbers stand at 5,000 troops, but a new quarterly report by the Pentagon shows that number reaches well over 8,000. Some of those troops have headed eastwards from the American base towards Tuz Humatu, a Kurdish-majority town located 100 kilometers west of the Iraqi border with Iran. If confirmed, this would mark the closest American troops have been stationed to the Iranian border since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. The US-led coalition has not confirmed nor denied the deployment. The Iraqi military deny any American boots are on the ground in Kirkuk. Meanwhile, inside the oil-rich city, there are still over 1 million displaced citizens, mostly from regions heavily damaged by the Iraqi government takeover from Kurdish Peshmerga forces. A spokesperson for the Iraqi Ministry of Displacement said the work to bring back those citizens is still ongoing.
بدأت حركة عودة حقيقية في كل المحافظات. الآن في بعض المناطق لدينا عودة أكثر من 90%. في بعض المناطق قد تتجاوز حتى 95% كمحافظة الأنبار، صلاح الدين، إديالة عودة جيدة حقيقة. تاريخ 26/11/2017 في حدود 408 ألف عائد فقط في الساحل الأيسر والأيمن.
Meantime, the Trump administration has issued its first warning to Iran against further expansion in Iraq in the face of an agreement to export Kirkuk oil to the Islamic Republic. CIA Director Mike Pompeo said he sent a cautionary letter to the leader of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, General Qasem Soleimani, warning against attacking US interests in Iraq and saying the Iranian government will be held responsible for any targeting of US troops. The Iranian state-run news agency Fars saying the commander of the Quds force refused to receive the letter, reportedly handed to him by a CIA contact in the Syrian town of Abu Kamal in November during the fighting against the Islamic State group. Here's those comments from the director of the CIA at the Reagan National Defense Forum in California this weekend.
And as far as the other things Iran's doing, not part of that deal, it has only increased in your eyes?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. The expanded efforts, you need only look to the past few weeks and the efforts of the Iranians to exert influence now in northern Iraq, in addition to other places in Iraq, to see that Iranians' effort to be the hegemonic power throughout the Middle East continues to increase. Indeed, there was a news story. It didn't get a lot of attention here. It got a lot in Iran. I'd sent a note to Qasem Soleimani. I sent it because he had indicated that forces under his control might, in fact, threaten U.S. interests in Iraq that are serving
Soleimani, by the way, the head of the
Iran
Revolutionary
Quds
Guard,
Force, the Quds Force. His commander has also indicated an increased willingness to potentially attack U.S. forces that are in Iraq with the consent of the Iraqi government. He refused to open the letter. Didn't break my heart, to be honest with you. What we were communicating to him in that letter was that we will hold he and Iran accountable for any attacks on American interests in Iraq by forces that are under their control. And we wanted to make sure he and the leadership in Iran understood that in a way that was crystal clear. We're there on an important mission on behalf of the Iraqi government. We intend to stay there so long as the Iraqi government wants us there to continue to perform that important mission.
In neighbouring Syria, Israeli warplanes dropped missiles on a secret meeting of pro-Iranian Shiite militia chiefs. This according to Debka File sources. The strike took place early Saturday at the Syrian Army's 91st Brigade headquarters. That's located outside Al-Kiswa, 14 kilometers southwest of the Syrian capital Damascus. It would mark Israel's first attack on forces under the command of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, whose militia were reportedly being briefed by officers on a major offensive to capture rebel-held pockets in the Quneitra region. No information so far on casualties from that strike, but Debka File's exclusive sources suggesting Iranian and Hezbollah officers were among those killed and wounded, with a local source reporting that 10 Iranians were killed in the Israeli attack. Meantime, Lebanese militia group Hezbollah and allied militia have been massing troops in southern Syria, set to launch an offensive on the small town of Al-Hara. That's located just 8 kilometers from the Israeli-controlled Golan. Now, it's seen as a key strategic location to retake rebel-held pockets of Quneitra and for control of the Syrian-Israeli-Jordanian border triangle. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu Saturday night responding to the events in southern Syria, warning that Iran will not be allowed to establish itself militarily on Israel's borders.
So let me reiterate Israel's policy. We will not allow a regime hell-bent on the annihilation of the Jewish state to acquire nuclear weapons. We will not allow that regime to entrench itself militarily in Syria, as it seeks to do, for the express purpose of eradicating our state.
Now, to break this all down, let's turn to this week's guest, founder of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies, Dr. Martin Sherman. Dr. Sherman, thanks for being back on the show with us.
Thank you for inviting me again.
Israel often cites a policy of non-intervention in Syria, and it always refuses to comment on the alleged strikes there. But isn't this getting, let's say, a little cloudy now, especially in light of these reports that Israel targeted Iranian officers in Syria? Where does that leave Israeli policy in the face of Iranian presence there?
Well, I think the non-intervention policy was related mainly to the Syrian civil war, not to the deployment of Iranian troops. I think Israel has been very clear about its opposition and its willingness to act against such a deployment. And perhaps with the latest revelations of the Iranians setting up a permanent presence in Syria, Israel felt it had to back up its words with action.
In that case, then, how involved do you see Israel becoming in what many are saying is the final phase of the civil war in Syria?
Well, as I said in our previous program, forecasting is always foolhardy in Syria. But I think one of the big unknowns here is the Russian involvement and how Russian interests and Iranian interests will converge or diverge, because this will impact directly on the freedom of the Israeli military to act, especially the Israeli Air Force. So I think that's the big unknown.
Do you think these attacks, these strikes may escalate into a full-blown war, or are they just continuation of skirmishes and strikes that we've seen throughout the last almost 7 years of conflict?
Well, I think the history of wars has shown that you know where you start and you don't know where you end. Whether this will make Iran resolute or more resistant still needs to be seen. But I think that a few fatalities south of Damascus is not something that's really going to impact the long-term Iranian strategy, given successes in other areas in Iraq, and we've just heard recently in Yemen as well. So I think that it will need far more assertive action by Israel to divert what seems to be Iranian strategy.
Iranian strategy. Okay, Dr. Sherman, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you so much for joining us here as we stay with the Syrian conflict. And thousands of Chinese elite troops are set to be deployed in Syria to fight Uyghur extremists from China's violence-prone far western region of Xinjiang, now said to be fighting inside Syria alongside militant rebel groups there. Debka File's counter-terrorism sources saying extremist elements of the ethnic Uyghur Muslim minority are engaged in a Turkish-backed plan to set up an autonomous enclave in the rebel-held Idlib province in northern Syria. Debka Weekly's intelligence sources report that China has secured permission from Damascus to send over 2,500 elite troops from 2 elite units to fight the minority group. Sources in Beijing saying troops are being sent to fight the Uyghur movement, as well as ISIS and Turkey's MIT National Intelligence Agency, sparking tension with Ankara as those militants were said to have arrived in Syria through their border. Ankara has the largest influence on armed forces in that Idlib governorate, northern Syria. raising concern in Beijing that separatists fighting there will fuel the unrest in Xinjiang, which the government blames on Islamist militants who want a separate state called East Turkestan. One political analyst saying Turkey collaborated with Russia and Iran to take control of the northern Syrian province during talks in the Black Sea resort town of Sochi last week.
وجود نوع من المراقبة المشتركة في مدينة إدلب وتثبيت منطقة خفض التوتر في هذه المنطقة، عدم حصول تصادم ما بين الجيشين التركي والسوري، فض الاشتباك أو نقاط التماس ما بين الجانب التركي مع الجانب الكردي. أضف إلى ذلك الاتفاق على دعم العملية السياسية أو التمهيد للعملية السياسية من خلال الضغط على كافة الأطراف ذات العلاقة مع هذه الدول للذهاب نحو العملية السياسية.
Moving to Jerusalem now, and US President Donald Trump is said to be ready to announce his decision on whether to recognize the holy city as Israel's capital. It's an unprecedented move that would upend decades of American policy and risk inflaming tensions in the region. He may also delay his campaign promise to move the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Final decisions reportedly not yet made. This according to his advisor and son-in-law, Jared Kushner.
What I'll say is that the president's going to make his decision, and
he hasn't made his decision?
He's still looking at a lot of different facts, and that when he makes his decision, he'll be the one to want to tell you, not me. So he'll make sure he does that at the right time. I think that there's a lot of instances of great trust between Israelis and Palestinians. I think that there's not a lot of trust between the leadership. And I think that's what we've been really working on, because the leadership ultimately has to come together. But I've been very overwhelmed by all the cases I've seen of Israelis and Palestinians working together and having great relationships and saying, look, if we could only get this thing resolved politically, then we could move on to, a much brighter future.
Meantime, a Palestinian Authority delegation told Kushner that if the administration announces the relocation of the embassy to Jerusalem, or if Trump acknowledges the holy city as Israel's capital, this would mark the end of the peace process. US officials threatening to shut down the PLO office in Washington unless the Palestinians sit to the table for negotiations. Sources saying Trump has the solid backing of Egypt and Saudi Arabia to pressure PA President Mahmoud Abbas to reignite talks. Sunday night, Abbas phoned Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in the Gaza Strip for his cooperation over the Jerusalem issue. Palestinians, of course, also claim Jerusalem as the capital of their own future state. Let's turn now to Dr. Max Singer, Senior Fellow at the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies and a founder and Senior Fellow of the Hudson Institute, to talk more on this. Dr. Singer, everyone's saying Trump is about to make a final decision on the Jerusalem move, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen, does it?
No, it doesn't. I think it's quite unclear what he's going to do, and I find it surprising that he's even considering yielding to Palestinian threats. Seems to me to be quite out of place for anybody, especially the Palestinians, to tell the United States where its embassy ought to be and threaten to make moves against the United States if the United States decides something they don't want.
What exactly would you say is the Palestinian Authority threatening to do?
Well, for one thing, it's threatening to not participate in peace talks. Those peace talks.
Is Israel offering to participate in those same peace talks?
Israel, I think, has always said it's ready to participate in peace talks. It's the Palestinians who are reluctant, as they're reluctant to make peace.
Let's take it back to the embassy for a minute. What kind of reaction from the rest of the region and, in fact, maybe the international community would we see if Trump does make this unprecedented move to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital and to relocate the American embassy?
Well, I think that the reaction in the Arab world would be much less than the Palestinians hope for and are trying to claim will happen. I think it'll be a big disappointment. Nothing much will happen.
Let's just touch on the future of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. In your opinion, is there something different, something new about this administration's peace push that could make it work this time, especially given the alleged backing of two regional powerhouses of Egypt and of Saudi Arabia? Do you predict any movement for this decades-old conflict with these new players in mind?
No, I don't think there will be. I think that the fundamental issue is the Palestinian attitude about having a non-Muslim power in the middle of the Muslim world, and a view that's shared throughout the Arab world with different degrees of emphasis.
Dr. Singer of the Begin Sadat Center, thank you very much for your insight. Moving to North Korea, where it says it has successfully tested a powerful new intercontinental ballistic missile that put the entire U.S. mainland within range of its nuclear weapons. The Hwasong-15 flew 10 times higher than the International Space Station. This, according to the South Korean military.
비행 특성과 외형 등을 고려 시 신형 ICBM급으로 판단됩니다. 비행 시험에는 성공한 것으로 평가되며 정상 각도 발사 시에는 13,000km 이상으로 워싱턴까지 도달 가능함을 의미합니다.
Now, the launch reportedly took Washington by surprise. They were expecting the next ICBM, the third in the series, to be launched at a later date and with a lesser impact. They were also taken aback by the ability to fire such a missile at night. The test last week is said to have accurately hit its target site in the East Sea after making a 53-minute flight. US President Donald Trump telling reporters, "It's a situation that we will handle."
Thank you very much. As you probably have heard, and some of you have reported, a missile was launched a little while ago from North Korea. I will only tell you that we will take care of it. We have General Mattis in the room with us, and we've had a long discussion on it. It is a situation that we will handle.
Okay, now to a roundup of this week's regional headlines you may have missed. The news in brief. The former Yemeni president, Ali Abdullah Saleh, has been killed Monday, his body paraded through the streets. This after he said he's ready to nullify his agreement with the Iran-backed Houthi rebel group if the Saudi-led coalition battling the Shiite rebels will lift the blockade on Yemen. The announcement already sparked violent clashes between his followers and the Houthi rebels. Debka sources recalling Ali Abdullah Saleh's long-running ties with the CIA. His change of side timed with a fresh US-Saudi intelligence push to restore the former president to the pro-West camp and topple Iranian positions in Yemen and the Arabian Peninsula. The Al-Qaeda group has released a new audio message from its elusive leader, slamming the Syrian jihadi group known as Hayat Tahrir al-Sham for going after senior jihadists loyal to Al-Qaeda in Syria. In a 35-minute message, Ayman al-Zawahiri condemned the Nusra Front's rebranding last year for renaming it Tahrir al-Sham without his approval. The official ISIS Al-Hayat Media Foundation has released a new video called Flames of War 2 Until the Final Hour. A trailer distributed on YouTube and Google Videos before being taken down. It presents US President Donald Trump as a foolish pharaoh and instructs jihadists in Sinai to keep hold of their territory, finishing the video with a mass execution by a masked man, seemingly with an American accent. The FBI are investigating. Russian President Vladimir Putin puts Chechnya and its leader to work in the fight for the Syrian regime. Leader Ramzan Kadyrov claiming they are manning some of Moscow's de-escalation zones in Syria and will therefore take part in discussions on Syria's political future. Meantime, 600 Chechen rebels have been fighting against President Bashar al-Assad since 2014 and hope to join the negotiating table on the side of the rebels. 2 Hezbollah agents were detained last month in the US in a joint FBI-NYPD investigation. The US Justice Department saying one conducted missions in Panama to locate embassies and access the canal, the other surveying potential targets in New York City. That's it for this week's edition of the Debka Files. Do join us again next week for exclusive breaking news, insight and analysis. Thanks for being with us. See you again then. Bye-bye.